Welcome back. This is the first video going over replacing the firewall. In this video, I remove the old firewall, get everything cleaned up, and go through countless test fits. Let's get going. Okay, as I prepared to remove the firewall, you might be able to see I have the car supported in a number of points. So on the rocker panel, I've got back towards the mount point of the front of the leaf springs and supported here up by the torque box. So that is the outer rocker supported front and back. Now I also have, forgive the shaking, here and here under the torque box and the floor support supported there. And then also at the front, I've got the front of the frame rail supported. That right there is just an oh no. It's not actually touching. It's there in case, in case I kick a jack stand or two or something. That's just a cheap insurance. So what I've done is just brought all of these up. You can see in a previous video, I went ahead and leveled everything, but I have everything just supported. When I remove the structure here, it's going to want to, let me get my hand in view. Basically, you're decoupling, again, this section from the front clip. So potentially, if things are weak enough, they can sag down in the middle. Now, I went and took measurements at a lot of places, just from top of the windshield down to the cowl, front of here, front of the core support to the cowl, and even from the top of the firewall down to the floor, just to get a good baseline of where things are, so that when I cut the old firewall out of there and place everything and start mocking things back up, I can know that they're going back where they came from. There it is. The firewall is out. Holy cow. That was a little bit of a beast of a job, not gonna lie. Of course, it's been spread out over multiple days, but still the final press, getting all the spot welds loose from the side panels, was kind of a bear. Some of the parts, the more rusty parts, popped off pretty nicely, like down at the floor and the places where I knew I had rust down, like this. All I had to do was drill out the spot walls and they popped right out. Other side, not so much. We know that side was a little more intact, but still, it came out. Spot weld driller, spot weld drill bit, completely indispensable. If you're doing this, they're cheap, grab one. Try not to get a little too aggressive because you can easily go through two pieces of metal if you're not trying to. All right, let me show you up close. New firewall, pieces of old firewall. And we can see the brake booster up close, and the hack job. I don't know what they tried to install here or how it got mangled like that, but hey, here we are. What I had done to get this out, sometimes it's a lot easier to get sections of metal out instead of one panel. So I cut kind of the wings, if you will, of either side, the parts that go to the exterior. So I cut these off first and removed the big centerpiece. Of course, I drilled out the transmission tunnel and got all that out, and then got the side pieces out separately. So what I'm going to do now, obviously things aren't perfectly clean, but I got all the old panel out. Excuse me. So just to see if I'm going to hit any big snags, I'm going to just kind of drop this into place, make sure it's remotely the right size and shape, and then put the new cowl on top and just to place everything. Okay, here's the steering I got out a couple of videos ago, or last video. I was trying to remove it, didn't have a pitman arm puller, so waited for that to come in and popped it right off there. I do have a replacement for this steering column. I got a collapsible steering column. 67, they had this is one long shaft all the way, so it's roughly 4 feet. Steering wheel attaches right there, so it's a 4-foot spike pointed right at your chest. Yeah, I think it's worth a few bucks to go ahead and not get speared. Also the what are we calling this? Brake pedal bracket, we'll call it. Various hardware, and I took pictures along the way of where everything went, and the little support for the cowl. And I'm pretty sure this is the original speaker. I don't know, it looks like it's in pretty good shape. I might reuse it. Okay, first test fit of the new Firewall. Couple of observations. On the far side, things look snug. If you look between the apron and Firewall, it's up snug. A little less so on this side. I think once I rebend kind of this upper flange and allow this to come back a little further, it's going to pull back in, but we will see. Yeah, it's not even touching the torque box here. So once I get the interference up top taken care of, I'm hoping that will kind of suck back in. The other observation is, and this might be where I phone a friend, I didn't remove the old trans tunnel. It's still intact. Is it even possible, because I was fighting with this for a few minutes, is it possible to, without cutting anything up, actually put this Firewall underneath the trans tunnel? It's supposed to go underneath the floors, including that middle section. And I'm twisting it, I'm folding it, I'm trying to get it underneath. If it doesn't go underneath, I don't think it's the end of the world, but just the idea is you want, if anything is splashing in the engine bay, you want it to go down the bottom instead of into that seam. So here are all three pieces, Firewall and the lower and upper cowl, just set in place. We'll call this a mock-up, not a test fit. So, and just for a little peace of mind, with this set basically where it's going to be, just taking a look at some of my measurements. So this is the back of the cowl edge. It's supposed to be 54 inches, and my goodness, we are spot on 54 inches. So at least that, I spot checked a couple other things, and they all seem to be, if not spot on, pretty darn close. Obviously, you can see the gap. It's not set where it's going to live, but that at least gives me a good little peace of mind that it's not going to be far off. Okay, we're back at it. I'm going to take some time, clean up all of the mating surfaces for the cowl and the Firewall. Okay, I'm fitting up this new Firewall. Let me see if I can show you. Up at the top, it appears to be mating up pretty well. As we go further and further down, it's kicked out towards the rear of the car. And I think I found where my interference is. Let's see if I can swing it around. The new Firewall has this lip here that extends below where the torque box is. You can see this, I think, got dented a little in shipment, but it's interfering here with the torque box. So I think what I need to do is just follow the line of the torque box as it comes up and cut off just right about there, just so I clear the torque box, and the same thing on the other side, and see how close that gets us to pulling up flush with the top of the torque box here. Okay, here's that little protrusion, little tab that I cut off to remove the interference, and I just used my 4.5 angle grinder, cut it off, and just used the sanding disc just to round it off so I don't cut myself. I'm gonna throw it back in for a test fit and see how it goes. Okay, I'm working on test fitting the firewall up in there. Let me show you what I'm dealing with. First things first, because I haven't removed the middle of the trans tunnel here, there's no way to work the firewall underneath the floor pan here like it's supposed to be, and I think that is throwing me off in a few places. So you can see that because it's raised up there, it's raised up here. This, let me see if I can show you. This is the bottom part of the firewall and the floor support. So there's, you know, a good 1/4 inch gap there, which isn't surprising. There's a big 1/4 inch gap there. However, the problem is this is kicking the bottom up. And I don't know if you can tell, there's a good amount of travel all the way before it hits the torque box. If I come along to the side here, I'm touching up top here, and then as I go down, the gap gets wider and wider. So it's basically kicked up, I think, it's kicked up at the bottom there. Somewhat of a similar story on the other side for similar reasons. I've tried just clamping it at the bottom and kind of manipulating it up, but that's creating a twist in the firewall itself. So, you know, I can push one side up and the other kind of, if I twist that one down, this side kicks back up and makes it worse. So what I've seen a couple folks do is make relief cuts here so that it actually, you know, helps mold to this diameter. I don't know if that's going to help it push down or not. I might consider, and I'm just kind of toying with the idea, either making a relief cut in the new firewall or in the floor pan so that I can actually manipulate the firewall underneath the floor pan. And it just needs to go, let's see if I can show you, just under the trans tunnel here. I don't know if that is reasonable or feasible, and obviously it would be something I would need to weld back up. I'm going to give this some thought and play around with it a little more and keep test fitting. Okay, I am inside the cab. You can see the firewall. I just have one little clamp holding it, so yeah, it's kind of up and at a 45-degree angle. From the side, one of two things is going to happen. Either I put it on top and just kind of put it down the easiest way, I suppose, and cut relief cuts here so that I can get the metal to come down. It's still going to be not at the right height. Yeah, because of just the height between here and the existing trans tunnel. Alternatively, I need to basically drop straight down 2 inches in order for it to curve under, and obviously I'm hitting here when I try to do that. So the alternative is, I think, still working this out, if instead of relief cuts here to make it fit around the tunnel, I just do relief cut here and on the other side and just bend the toe boards up 2 inches to get that clearance, I should be able to get this lip underneath here and move it into place. Either way, I'm either going to be welding up relief cuts for the tunnel or welding up relief cuts for the toe boards there, I think. I'm going to give this a lot more thought. I don't want to make more work for myself, but I feel like cutting relief cuts for the tunnel and kind of massaging 3 different parts of the firewall to make it fit the same way as the old one is going to be more work than just making the cuts here so that the toe boards can flex upwards and allow this to go underneath the trans tunnel. Okay, with it tested in place, if I were to essentially bend the toe boards up to get this to clear underneath the floor, I would need to make a cut roughly there and about the same spot on the other side. I feel like the passenger side is probably the easiest one here. You've got these two shapes in the metal, but if you make a cut here, it should just kind of move as one flap. I just need to bend. I don't want to crease it. So I feel like that's going to be the easier side. Okay, I went for it. It turns out I went up to maybe about here, the top of this crease on the passenger side, and just out of curiosity, I went to see how close it was to fitting, and it was extremely close. So all I did was I just extended this a couple more inches, and I was able to, with a little bending of this up and a little twist of the firewall, scooch right underneath that floor pan. Guys, I'm pretty excited about that, and you can see immediately how much better things are. This is resting right on top of the floor support. Obviously these got separated, but just 2 fingers holding them together. And well, okay, it takes more than 2 fingers because now it has a little twist in it, but there we go. These come basically flush. That mounts flush against there. That pushes flush. Yeah, everything is just instantly better. I'm obviously not holding it, but that meets up really nicely. Her gap is closed significantly. There are no clamps in place. It's just there. Coming around to the other side. And I don't know if you can tell, there is a gap there, but that pulls together pretty nicely. And once I can't do it, show you and do it at the same time, but this should close up a lot nicer. So, extremely excited about that. That being said, there's always something, right? Let me see if I can show you this. Okay, so all that being said, something is amiss here. So we saw we're really close on these flanges. If I go vertical down this flange, you can see where let me see if I can show you. We're a little inverted, forgive me, but you can see where the holes I drilled out were and where this is currently sitting. Even if I press up against and make sure that the firewall is mating up against that fender apron, we're still almost half a weld hole off. I'm going to check my measurements, put a couple clamps up where I think it needs to sit, check my measurements and see what's going on here. I suspect I'll go measure the pieces I cut out. You see how wide this flange is? And when I press it, it goes almost aligned to this crease. See how much shorter this one is? I think it's a matter of the stamping. I think the flange they're short by about a ½ inch there. And if it were the same width as this longer one, that would be plenty to weld to. So, exciting times. Let me go address what's going on and take a look. Okay, this might be a little crude. Here's a section of the old firewall that I had cut out. And I went ahead and aligned the holes that I drilled out so that it is aligned just where it was. And I'm going to try to take a measurement just from there to there. And I don't know if you can tell, but kind of right here at this second hole down, it's exactly 1 inch back. So now I'm going to push this firewall back in place, put it at 1 inch and see where it lands. Okay, I went ahead and clamped it up against the fender apron. This is going to be tough to do single-handedly, but I can show you we're just about 1 1/16 if I'll have to take my word on this, if I manipulate it ever so slightly this way, I get to that just about 1 inch. So, and there goes my compressor. Okay, before we were so rudely interrupted. So, here I'm pressing back to give that same amount of pressure. I don't know if you can see, but clearly we are not in the same spot. So I should correct myself. With the firewall itself in the same spot, the flange isn't wide enough to cover these holes. So yeah, looks like when they stamped this, the stamping was just a little too shy. Suppose it's only like 10 inches or so. I can extend it. It's a lot of work just to extend the flange. I'm going to think about how I'm going to tackle that. I'm seeing a very similar thing on the other side too. So, yeah, we'll figure that out. Okay, I'm going to try to show you something, and hopefully this will illustrate the importance of test fitting everything together. So if you recall, I had a nice tight gap there. The gap here was not perfect, but pretty good, and I had it clamped in place flush up against the torque box. I went ahead and put the lower cowl in place and lined up these alignment holes and just put one single clamp there just to see how it aligned. And lo and behold, that is unacceptable. Obviously, I still need to clean this up, but that gap is entirely too large. Something's not right here. So, interesting thing, if I go and close this gap, it pushes, you can see obviously, like I said, I still have to straighten out that metal. It closes up, not terribly, not great. There's some manipulation that needs to happen to get it to fit up here, but I don't know if you heard when I did that, the firewall audibly scooched down. And now, if I can show you, we can almost get my pinky in between. So this gap opened up, the gap here opened up. And if we go around to the inside, the firewall, if you can see with this flange, is no longer up against the torque box. There's a nice gap behind there. So what happened? What this tells me is the angle here isn't right. So what I think needs to happen is, obviously the firewall is where it needs to be. I think this angle needs to open up a little bit, because if I try to make this section meet up, it pushes everything too far upwards. So I have to change the angle of the firewall to make it meet up. So the interesting thing is, if I hadn't test fit the cowl, if I had put it, everything lines up down here, lines up there, lines up with the other boards, everything looked good. If I had welded that in place, I would now have a nightmare scenario trying to get this cowl in. So it's kind of the little things like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this clamp, do the same thing with the upper part of the cowl, put it in place, try to line up these alignment holes, clamp it in place, and see what other interference issues I'm having. The upper cowl meets not just to this, but to this, and kind of first glance, that angle might be off. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and keep test fitting and seeing what might need to change, and then make some notes, take some measurements, and take it all off and adjust anything that needs adjusting. Before I lay any welds in place, once I have everything bent and adjusted the way I need it to, I'm going to take some sheet metal screws and in a few strategic spots, just sheet metal everything in place or screw everything in place, and grab the fenders from the ceiling there and the roof, and just kind of make sure that everything is where it needs to be within adjustment parameters for all the metal. It's a little thing like this, and taking a little extra time that is going to save a headache down the road. And trust me, I've caused myself plenty of headaches. Okay, continuing to test fit. There's a few spots. I don't know if you can see this. We've got the lower cowl underneath and the upper cowl on top here. On this side, lower cowl fits pretty close. That angle, geez, it'd be nice if I tried to point with a different hand than I was holding the camera. This angle probably needs to change to close this up a little bit. And then the upper cowl, obviously, this needs to go further down. We're got maybe 1/8 of an inch gap there, and this angle is too acute. So that needs to open up a little bit to let the upper cowl sit down in. But I went ahead and used, bolts and socket extensions of the right diameter just to line up the alignment holes there. And just kind of didn't really, I know this is not where everything is going to go finally until it's reshaped, but got everything kind of clamped in place a little bit just to align. So obviously some tweaks need to be made here. So the critical part is up top here where your cowl and everything interacts, right? We've got the sideboards, the fender aprons, the dash, everything up top here interacts with itself or with each other. So getting all of that aligned and happy with itself is, in my mind, a little more important. More important than the toe boards here. So interesting thing, when I think it's either the height or where the bend is in this panel, but when the firewall, the vertical section is where it needs to be, I think this is, the toe boards are a little too low. So let me see if I can show you. Can I do this one-handed? So if I were to push on the outside and push it all the way against the torque box, it flexes this side where I made that slit. This is probably not useful video. So I've got a lot of flex here, and it's like it's pivoting here. It's possible when this is down, if I put relief cuts on the inside, then the inside here, actually, yeah, you can see that. Maybe you can see that. So maybe I just need to pull the tunnel of the firewall up to the transmission tunnel there. Maybe that's kind of the big thing that's hindering the toe boards. So, but anyway, lots more test fitting to go. Okay, I've been aligning and fiddling and clamping in place. I think I'm to the point where I've got the firewall and lower cowl at least at the right height and distance this way. As you saw on the other side, I still need to do a little bit of make fit over here. What I'm gonna do is remove everything, clean up this surface, get everything prepped. We're not there yet, but at least get it prepped to receive everything. And then I'm going to, just at a couple of spots, probably apron to firewall, and then firewall to sideboard, and maybe one, well, we'll save that one. They're a little small. They're number 8 by 3/4, but they'll do the trick. Some self-tapping screws just to hold things in place. And I'm probably going to do maybe one on the inside of the tunnel and in the corners, just to make sure that the toe boards are where they need to be, the tunnel's where it needs to be. And so I was back and forth mocking up the upper and lower cowl onto the firewall. I think I showed this earlier, but I've got the firewall just held in to the sideboards with a self-tapping screw, and then clamped at the base, both to the floor support, the trans tunnel, and the other floor support. So it is pushed up to where my measurements say it should be, and then measuring from here to here, and then the core support to the front and back of the cowl. Everything is spot on the measurements. Of course, I've covered it up, so I can't show you right now, but the lower cowl, there's a few spots where it's raised a little higher, but it meets where it should in front and back, and that's just a matter of bending that flange to go flush up against the sideboard in here. So no issues there. This tells me that everything is where it needs to be. The cowl is up and down where it needs to be, front and back where it needs to be, side to side where it needs to be. I'm pretty sure there's a song in there. So what I did was I took, I test fitted just with the hood just laid in place earlier. I got my fenders down off the ceiling, and they are just held in with a finger tight bolt, just to get a feel for how things would line up. So obviously you can see they can still move around. Okay, I've got, like I said, the sideboards held in place to the firewall here, so that defines the height. Now I'm looking kind of side to side how things go, measuring the gap on that side and that side, which if they're not perfect, that's not a big deal. However, if things aren't defined properly, that could be a big deal. Let me show you what I've done. I took the export braces here that go from shock tower to firewall, and I noticed, my clock again, I noticed on one side, now granted these are just loose in there, I just wanted to make sure that it's defined well. What I plan to do is, before I weld, I will tighten everything up and hold it in place, just so that it's defined exactly where it's going to be here. On the driver's side, you get you an angle there, holes line up just basically where you would expect them to. The bolt's a lot smaller than the hole, so yeah, that is pretty much spot on what you'd expect. Passenger side, what is going on here? So same on this side, it's fairly loose, but it's all the way back. Now there was some tension on this when I removed it. It doesn't slide right in, it's under tension, which again, we've talked about it a few times, front end damage, who knows what shifted around and warped. That's not that unexpected. I was a little surprised that it was that far off though. So let me show you if I can do this one-handed. So just take a socket extension, and let me see if I can show you what happens. Okay, we're on a tripod. Let me see if I can show you what happens if I use an extension just to push the firewall where it would need to be to meet up with the export brace. So I don't know if this will come across on the video, but when I do that, it moves back maybe a quarter inch or so, which is very interesting. And here, let me also put the lower cowl in place and show you how that changes the shape of things. Okay, exact same setup. This time I put the lower cowl in place. I'm going to do the exact same thing and line up the firewall and the upper and lower cowl and pushing it. So I don't know if it's coming across on video, but watch this back edge as I do that. It basically brings the cowl back towards this back edge, which I think is actually closer to what needs to happen. while we're at it, let's just go ahead and do the same thing with the upper cowl in place. Okay, once again, exact same setup. I'm gonna do this with nothing clamped in place, just the screws holding the firewall there. And I'm just gonna do the same manipulation. There we go. So I don't know if it's showing up on video, but the gap that we had at the back of the cowl closed in a lot tighter now. Yeah, so test fit and test fit with all the pieces. Yeah, and I'm just pushing down a little bit right now on the back of the upper cowl to make it form, and it's the closest it's been in any of the test fits. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. What I will do is take everything off, prep the firewall for welding, and then reassemble everything again, put the bolts in the export braces, clamp the cowls, upper and lower cowl together, and get sheet metal screws in a few more spots just so everything's held and make sure everything is flush. And then we'll see if we can get welding.